Questions orales. Oral questions. Leonard.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Common Sense Conservatives want to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget and stop the crime. But this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. After 8 years, he's doubled national debt, which has led to rampant generational inflation, forcing 2 million Canadians to food banks. According to his own statistics, the Prime Minister has spent more on interest on that than on health. Why is he giving more money to bankers than to actual healthcare professionals? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, quite the contrary. It's the Conservatives who continue to put forward austerity and cuts whilst we invest in nurses and doctors. We are here to invest $200 billion, Mr. Speaker, over the next 10 years in order to improve our healthcare system. We are here to deliver a national program for food at schools to help children study with a full stomach. We will also be here to broaden childcare benefits so that families can take care of their children while working. We are here to help them. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. But he's still not worth the cost. He continues to spend, causing worst inflation levels. There are 2 million people that have to go to food banks every month. He's doubled the cost of housing, even after having spent $80 billion in housing. These are programs that balloon government costs and that butt into provincial jurisdictions. Will he finally meet our premiers to defend his inflationist and expansionist policy? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We will continue to meet premiers to work on affordability for families. In order to work for housing investments in Quebec, for example, we've put forward $900 million for the House Building Accelerator Fund, and Quebec is doubling that money, meeting us halfway to build houses throughout the province. We are here to work hand in hand with provinces to fight against climate change, to fight against the housing crisis, and to invest in young people, invest in seniors. We will be here to build a stronger future whilst the Conservatives keep preaching austerity every single day.
And I have Chef de l'Opposition.
Common Sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Indeed, his carbon tax, which the Parliamentary Budget Officer has proven costs 60% of Canadians more than they get back in rebates, is now opposed by 70% of Canadians. Everybody understands that the tax is driving people to the food bank. That's why 6 premiers, including the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, have asked for a meeting. Will he agree to a televised carbon tax conference if he's so sure of himself on this issue?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed that 8 out of 10 families across the country get more money with the Canada Carbon Rebate attached to the price on pollution than it costs them. That's $1,800 arriving for a family of 4 in Alberta. It's thousands of dollars right across the country. These are things that are helping people with the high cost of living and groceries at the same time as we fight climate change. But, Mr. Speaker, what would be also helpful is if we were able to deliver the doubling of the rural top-up to put hundreds of dollars in the pockets of Canadians, but the Conservative Party is blocking the legislation to double the rural top-up.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is mathematically impossible, given that the NDP Liberal government has a combined majority and can pass anything it wants, which is exactly why we're in such a mess today as a country. After 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and that's why the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirms 60% of Canadians are paying more in carbon taxes than getting back in rebates. But why doesn't the Prime Minister, if he believes the contrary, why doesn't he have the courage to sit down in a televised and open forum and have a carbon tax conference with the premiers.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We did sit down with the premiers 8 years ago and established the Pan-Canadian Framework on Climate Change that both puts a price on pollution and puts more money back in the pockets out of 8 of 10 Canadian families in the jurisdictions where the federal backstop applies. That is a way of both fighting climate change and helping with affordability. Now, not only are the Conservative Party counting on taking away those Canada carbon rebate checks, they're arriving this coming Monday on April 15th. People will see in their bank accounts the Canada carbon rebate that puts more money in their pockets ahead of the costs associated with fighting climate change.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he met the premiers in 2016. Since that time, he's broken the promise he made them. He said the tax would only go up to 11 cents a litre. Now, he admits it will go up to 61 cents a litre. He said the tax would make people better off. Now we have the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, which confirms 60% of Canadians pay more than they get back. The Prime Minister said, and I quote in 2015, Canadians need a PM who will meet with the premiers. What happened?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
While the Conservative leader continues with his misinformation and disinformation, the reality is the Parliamentary Budget Officer said that 8 out of 10 Canadians do better with our price on pollution and the Canada carbon rebate. But speaking of misinformation and disinformation, any responsible leader that receives an endorsement and support from proven conspiracy theorist and liar Alex Jones would have immediately denounced that. But that's not what the Leader of the Opposition did. He did absolutely nothing because those kinds of endorsements fit within his political strategy.
À l'ordre. À l'ordre. Order.
The Honourable Member for Bailleul-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is multiplying interference in Quebec's jurisdiction. In Ottawa, there's no department or expertise in health or education or childcare or municipal affairs. They don't know how things work, but they have our money due to a budgetary imbalance. Does he recognize that the Assemblée nationale of Quebec has better skills in healthcare, education, childcare, and municipal affairs? Simple question. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we've always recognized and respected provincial jurisdictions, and we respect Quebec's specificities, but we know that even with all the expertise under the sun, there are still Canadians who are finding housing, who are trying to find housing, people who are trying to find childcare spots, people who are finding it hard to make ends meet. And as a federal government, we are here to work in partnership with Quebec, with provinces, in order to invest in the help that people need. Yes, we have federal money, but we are here to invest it with provinces in order to help Canadians, and that's what we need to do. The Honourable Member for Bailleul-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, when my car breaks down, I don't give my money to my dentist because my dentist doesn't know how to fix a car. They don't know how things work in Quebec. They have to whittle together some skills in jurisdictions that are not theirs. Their interference makes things longer and more expensive, and it won't be better than if they just let us spend our money. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We will always work hand in hand with the provinces in order to deliver services that Canadians need. But let us talk about dentists, Mr. Speaker. 1.7 million seniors throughout the country have signed up to our dental care program that will be delivered from coast to coast to coast, and that includes Quebec. We are here to make sure that seniors in Quebec and throughout the country can obtain the healthcare that they need and that they could not afford before now. We are here to help the well-being of all Canadians and all Quebecers, and we'll always do so, respecting jurisdictions and in partnership with our partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Burnaby South.
Mr. Climate deny, Mr. Climate delay, strike again. The Corporate Knights report shows that the Prime Minister is delaying $15 billion that he promised to hardworking Canadians to lower their costs and their emissions. Yet the Prime Minister has no problem finding $18.6 billion in free subsidies for big oil and gas. So why is it that the Prime Minister wants to shoulder the burden of the climate crisis on hardworking people and not give them a hand, but wants to give billions of dollars, like the Conservatives, to big oil and gas corporations?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we committed to phase out inefficient fuel and gas subsidies, oil and gas subsidies, 2 years ahead of all of our partners around the world. We're going to continue to do that. But it's unfortunate to see that the NDP seems to be falling into the Conservative misinformation trap. Our price on pollution actually puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families right across the country, particularly middle-income and low-income families, while we continue to fight climate change. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we developed a way to fight climate change and reduce emissions while putting more money in people's pockets, and we're going to keep doing that.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Paying the $15 billion for hardworking people, and that's wrong. L'été dernier.
Last summer, children were not able to go out and play and have fun in the park because of forest fire smoke. And yet, the Liberals think it is smart to delay climate action. They send $18 billion in subsidies to big oil companies, yet are delaying $15 billion in investments for the climate crisis and to help people. Why does the Prime Minister prefer to put money straight into the pockets of big oil CEOs instead of actually helping Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we see every single year the ever-worsening impacts of climate change and the costs thereof, which affect Canadians, our economy. And that is the reason for which we'll continue to fight against climate change whilst putting more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians, because this is a responsible plan that will fight against climate change and will help with the cost of living. Unfortunately, the Conservatives continue to say no to fighting climate change. They want to remove investments to help Canadians.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Speaker, the incoming leader of the Liberal Party has just given a speech and given advice to his soon-to-be predecessor. He said that he agrees, this is Mark Carney, says he agrees that there should be a carbon tax conference where the premiers can come together and share their concerns about the Prime Minister raising the cost of living and breaking the back of Canadians. Will the Prime Minister won't listen to me, he won't listen to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, will he at least listen to his successor and meet the premiers on the carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister for Energy and Natural Resources. Order. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, it is important for Canadians who are watching this debate to be careful about the misinformation being spewed by the Leader of the Opposition. It is important for a responsible government in this country to have a plan for addressing climate change and do so in a manner that enhances and addresses affordability concerns. That is exactly what the price on pollution does. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back. 200 economists across the country agree with us. It is such a shame that we have a bunch of climate deniers over there who have no plan for the environment and no plan for the economy.
I ask all members, please, to only take the mic, only take the floor when they're recognized by the Speaker. I'll recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Mark Carney, who is the next Liberal leader, is a fierce supporter of the carbon tax. He's been called carbon tax Max Carney in the past, and he is willing at least to defend his carbon tax views in front of the premiers. The Prime Minister is not. He's running for cover and hiding from Canadians, refusing to defend his own policy decisions. If the Prime Minister is really so proud of his plan to hike the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, why won't he listen to Mark Carney and have a big, open, televised carbon tax conference?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very interesting that the Leader of the Opposition seems so fond of Mark Carney these days, who actually, as you say, does believe in a price on pollution. Perhaps the Leader of the Opposition should listen to him. But it is important with respect to the premiers to know that the premiers have every right to submit a plan that actually meets the federal benchmark and put in place their own price on pollution. That is something that British Columbia has done. That is something that Quebec has done. Mr. Speaker, Premier Moe was actually here recently and testified before the committee. And what Premier Moe said is he looked at alternatives to the price on pollution. He found every one of them to be too expensive. This from a guy who has no climate plan,
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Last week, the Prime Minister increased the carbon tax by 23% on Canadians, on gas, on groceries, on home heating. He's doubling down and defying 70% of Canadians and 8 premiers who want him to axe the tax. 6 of those premiers wrote the Prime Minister asking for a meeting to talk about his punishing carbon tax. Instead, the Prime Minister just shot down the idea because they already had a meeting 8 years ago. Can the Prime Minister tell us how many premiers he met in 2016 that are still in power today?
The Honourable Minister for Families and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, actions speak more than words. Our actions on this side of the House, over 750,000.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister to start again because the Chair sincerely could not hear what the Minister was saying. The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, actions speak louder than words. On this side of the House, our actions, over 750,000 families benefiting from affordable childcare spaces, over 100,000 new spaces across the country, 7 million children whose parents benefit from the Canada Child Benefit, a national school food policy. Their actions, Mr. Speaker, vote against funding to increase the number of spaces, vote against a national school food policy, Mr. Speaker. They've made it clear they're not there for Canadian families.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if she missed the question, but Canadians certainly missed the answer. It's 0. 2016 is the last time he had a meeting. Pokemon Go, dabbing, Harambe, that's what was popular in 2016. And you can get an apartment for half the price. Since the last time the Prime Minister had a meeting with the premiers, gas and groceries have skyrocketed and interest rates have increased 10 times over. So will he put aside his desperation and defiance, do some work around here, and meet the premiers?
Then the Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Speaker, what Canadians will see today is one thing they will not hear from these conservative, Mr. Speaker, is the cost of inaction. The cost of forest fire, Mr. Speaker, the cost of flooding in our country, the cost of drought, Mr. Speaker. When each of these conservatives are standing up, they're telling Canadians they have no plan, Mr. Speaker, to fight climate change. On this side of the House, we recognize, like all Canadians, we need to act to save the planet. We need to act on climate change. That's why we're going to invest in Canadian. That's why we're going to continue to invest to make sure that we have a planet to live for children.
Then I have
the Honourable Member for Louis St. Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, housing has never been in such a sorry state. Rents have doubled, mortgages have doubled. And what's this government strategy? To have a photo op. They always have an announcement with a photo op, but yesterday they breached new grounds. Yesterday the Prime Minister did a photo op on a roof. But that doesn't help Canadians put a roof over their heads. What is the government's plan to help Canadians who can't find a roof for their head? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Government Services. As we said, there are two clear figures, 6,000 and 8,000. As during his mandate as housing minister, there were 6 affordable housing units built. We made an announcement that will create 42 new housing units. That means that in his riding, we have created 7 more housing units than his leader did during his mandate as housing minister. The honourable member for... Just 1 second. The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent, from the top. Mr. Speaker, I would like to tell my honourable colleague that I know what happens in my riding and that, yes, people are finding it hard to make ends meet. Yes, inflation is hitting people hard. And yes, this government is just spending without control. And that is adding fire to the flames of inflation. Mr. Speaker, the member, who is a minister as well, who is a well-respected academic, how will he explain to his future students that a budget can balance itself, like the Prime Minister keeps claiming? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague. I respect him. First of all, austerity is not a solution in 2024. The second thing I have to say is that respect is the foundation of academic relations. And that is true everywhere in Canada. I would like him to apologize to Quebec City, because he called the leaders of Quebec City incompetent, which is a shambles. The honourable member for Jonquière. New day, new interference. Today, it's the mental health of students that the Liberals want to manage. The same government that, let's not forget, is incapable of paying its own public servants through Phoenix. The same one that was unable to print passports. The same one that lost control of the borders and exacerbated the housing crisis. Imagine. The government now wants to manage the care offered to young people in distress. Are you reassured? Because I'm certainly not. Once again, since the federal government has no expertise in mental health, it manages no clinics and no psychologists. Let's be serious one moment, Mr. Speaker. Is it finally going to transfer this money to Quebec? The Honourable Minister for Transport. Mr. Speaker, when we invest in housing, everyone, the Bloc cries, the Conservative cries. When we invest in food for our younger students, they cry. When we invest in our seniors, the Bloc and the Quebec and the Bloc and the Conservatives cry. They're just crying together at the end of the day. You don't know which one's which at the end of the day. So at the end, we're just going to have the same people. Dear colleagues, I would like to ask all members to make sure that language used be respectful and dignified in these halls. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. We'd just like to let the federal government know that we have collaborated well when they copied our childcare program. Given that we already had the skills, they sent us the money unconditionally, and everyone was happy. So why would it be different for mental health? With pharmacare that we've had for nearly 30 years, with dental care that we've had for over 50 years, why, for this case, can they not just simply transfer the money to Quebec? The Honourable Minister for Transport. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc is never happy. We invest in housing, they're not happy. We invest in our children, they're not happy. We invest in food banks, they're not happy. The Bloc is never happy. They're just losing their identity. They're being eclipsed by the Conservatives, who are doing their job better than they are. The Honourable Member for Avignon-La Métis, Matane-Matapédia. while the Liberals try to govern Quebec. Instead of Quebec, no one is governing the federal government. There's no one to table a true transition plan for the fisheries sector. There's no one to deal with a comprehensive reform of employment insurance. This morning, we even learned that the federal government is $14 billion behind in its promises to invest in the fight against climate change. By meddling in other people's business, the government is forgetting to deal with the major issues for which it is directly responsible. So, if there's no shortage of work at the federal level, why don't the Liberals actually get on with it and do their jobs? The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. As she knows full well, for a long time, I've fought for the environment to fight against climate change, and back then we all had a dream. When I was in the private sector, we wanted a federal government that would invest billions upon billions in fighting climate change. It never happened before we came to power, Mr. Speaker. At the time, it was just $100 million, a couple of $100 million, but now these are a couple of $100 billion that we're using to fight climate change. This is an absolute record in the history of our country. We are transforming the economy and jobs for decades to come, and in fighting our climate change.
The honourable member from Regina, Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. The Prime Minister raised his carbon tax 23% last week, driving up the cost of gas and groceries. Fortunately, Conservative Bill C-234 will exempt farmers' grain drying and barn heating from the carbon tax so food remains affordable. Will the Prime Minister lower costs on farmers and make food cheaper by passing Bill C-234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, it's important to actually ensure that we're dealing with the facts. 97% of on-farm fuels are actually exempt from the price on pollution, and there is a rebate to address farmers and farm incomes on a go-forward basis. In Canada, 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back. In fact, Professor Dalter at the University of Regina, who the honourable member might want to go talk to, called out the Conservatives last week for misinformation. When Conservative leader and his ally and the Conservative leader's ally, Scott Moe, appeared before committee on the carbon price, journalists called his appearance a parade of nonsense and completely dishonest. Conservative slogans and misinformation do not help Canadians with affordability.
The honourable member from Regina, Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Prime Minister is not going to back down from his carbon tax obsession. It's clear that he is going to continue to raise the carbon tax on gas, groceries, and home heating and make life even more expensive for Canadians. Since the Prime Minister refuses to call a carbon tax election, will he at least meet with the premiers and listen to their plans to make life more affordable?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Speaker, as the honourable member knows full well, provinces and territories can put in place their own price on pollution. That is what British Columbia has done. That is what Quebec has done. Those provinces that are actually committed to fighting change. But the honourable member comes from a province that has no climate plan, no climate targets. Their premier admits that the price on pollution is the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions, and yet he does nothing. That's a shame. Shame.
Double shame.
The honourable member from Red Deer, Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are tapped out. April 1st saw Canadians hit with a 23% carbon tax increase by these Liberals. As a farmer, Mr. Speaker, I know the first-hand true impact of carbon tax bills on farm operations. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. It's time to axe the tax on farmers and food and pass Bill C-234. Will the Prime Minister lower costs on farmers and make food cheaper by passing Bill C-234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate my honourable colleague's question, but it's important to remind my colleague, as a farmer, I'm fully aware that farmers are on the front line of climate change. And it's important to realize, Mr. Speaker, that farmers are devastated by massive storms on the prairie. Straw worth $300 a bale. That is crazy, Mr. Speaker. We have a plan to address climate change, and we have a Canada carbon rebate that refunds put more money in 8 out of 10 Canadians. We are addressing climate change and making sure the polluters pay, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Simcoe Grey.
Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister tweets out sunny ways from his rooftop, food banks in Simcoe County are reporting a 100% increase in use. Last week at the Angus Food Bank, Director Heather Morgan told me that active soldiers from Base Borden are regular visitors. Let that sink in. Meanwhile, Liberals hiked the carbon tax by 23% and continue to delay Common Sense Bill C-234. Will the Prime Minister pass Bill C-234 in its original form and axe the tax on farmers and make food more affordable for all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The whole structure of the price on pollution, as the honourable member knows, is done in a manner that creates an incentive to reduce carbon emissions, but do so in a manner that is affordable for Canadians. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back. It works in direct proportion to income, so that those who live on the most modest incomes are the best off with respect to carbon pricing. Climate change is real, Mr. Speaker, whether the Conservatives like to understand that or not. Their premiers, Scott Moe and Danielle Smith, have both admitted that carbon pricing is the most effective and efficient way to reduce emissions. Get with the program.
Certain all members would like to make sure that questions and comments are directed through the chair. The Honourable
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
To the NDP, we now have dental care in Canada. This was opposed by the corporate Conservatives at every single step. Now, the Democrats fought for nearly 2 million seniors who will benefit from the dental care program in a few weeks' time. Now, dentists are raising concerns about the rollout of the program. Seniors shouldn't have to wait any longer to benefit from going to their dentist. What will the minister do to ensure that every senior who is registered will benefit from the dental care program without delay?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is exactly right. When parties work together and focus on solutions, we get things done. And that means making sure that for millions of Canadians who don't have access to oral health care, they're going to get dental care. 1.7 million seniors have signed up. We've seen hundreds of thousands of dental providers across the country sign up. We're creating a new portal to make sure that it's even easier for dentists to participate by working together, both as parliamentarians, but as Canadians. We can get through difficult times by making things better together.
The Honourable Member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, the Guaranteed Income Supplement is a lifeline for seniors across this country. Shamefully, at a time when grocery prices and rents are sky high, the Liberals are clawing back this support for more than 100,000 seniors receiving workers' compensation. This is wrong. The Liberals shouldn't be punishing seniors who were injured on the job. When will this government reverse the clawback so that seniors can afford groceries and rent?
The Honourable Minister for Labour.
Speaker, I'm very proud to stand in this House next to the Minister of Health as we roll out one of the largest social programs that Canada has ever seen. We are now up to 1.8 million seniors who are now registered for Canada's new dental program. This is something that will save lives. This is something that will restore dignity to the lives of so many seniors. And with so many seniors that registered up until the month of May, I look forward to more seniors enjoying the dignity of quality health care regardless of injury, regardless of birthright. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saint Laurent.
In 2017, our government released our defense policy, Strong, Secure, Engaged. Since then, the world has fundamentally changed. Russia has attacked Ukraine, the Arctic is more accessible to foreign actors, and the international rules that have kept us safe for over 75 years are increasingly challenged. As a member of the Standing Committee on National Defense, I have personally advocated for a modernization of our defense policy to better meet the needs of today. Can the Minister of Defense update this House on our government's work to update our existing defense policy?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member from Saint Laurent for a question. And I'm pleased to share with this House that yesterday we released our renewed vision for defence. Our North Strong and Free is a clear plan to build Canadian armed forces that will defend our sovereignty and protect our interests globally. It's a responsible plan, Mr. Speaker, that will support the members of the Canadian Armed Forces and help us grow their numbers. It's a plan to acquire and maintain the equipment and capabilities that they require to fulfill their mission. It's a plan to assert our sovereignty to defend our country and our continent. And finally, Mr. Speaker, it's a plan that makes us strong at home so that we can be strong around the world.
The Honourable Member from Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government and their carbon tax, Canadians are struggling to put food on their tables. When you tax the farmer who grows the food and you tax the trucker who ships the food, you punish all Canadians who buy the food. Food banks like the Cambridge Food Bank are now seeing record-breaking demand. This Prime Minister's 23% carbon tax hike is not worth the cost. So will the Prime Minister lower the cost on farmers and make food cheaper by passing Bill 234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague talks about putting food on the table. I'm proud to be part of a government that believes that hungry kids should have food on the table. I'm proud to be part of a government that's taking action to implement a school food program so those hungry kids are able to eat when they go to school. It's unbelievable to me to hear this rhetoric from the Conservative opposition when they have the gall to stand up and vote against putting food on the table for hungry kids. They talk a big game, but when they have a chance to do anything to put the food on the table for my constituents, they oppose at every turn. We'll do what it takes to help working class families and middle class families and kids when it comes to putting food on the table.
The Honourable Member from Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, that minister is so out of touch because here are the facts. After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, we have a record-smashing 2 million Canadians using a food bank in a single month, with over 1 million more expected this year. Food banks like the one in Cambridge are now seeing dual-income families, full-time working Canadians, and our seniors lining up at the food banks. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will this Prime Minister finally show some compassion and make food cheaper for Canadians by passing Bill 234 in its original form?
Great job. The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Speaker, the mums and dads across this country that we've been helping, I worry for them, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has been very clear, and his actions are all we need to know, all we need to point to. We point to their opposition of a motion and a vote to support a national school food program. Can point to their opposition and a vote to oppose expanding funding for more childcare to help families out. Mr. Speaker, their actions are clear. They will cut, cut, cut.
The Honourable Member from Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, the NDP Liberal government and the Prime Minister's 23% carbon tax is not worth the cost. The Prime Minister doesn't understand. If you tax the farmer who grows the food, you end up taxing the family who buys it. People are struggling in New Brunswick. 40 to 50 military families need to visit Gagetown Food Bank just to feed their kids. Now, UNB had to create their own food bank to feed their students. Will the Prime Minister lower costs on farmers and make food cheaper by passing Bill 234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, it's hard to take seriously the Honourable Member's criticism when he and his party voted against a pay raise for the men and women who serve this country in uniform. When we go to this chamber every day, we have an opportunity to stand up for policies that help middle-class families put food on the table. When we cut taxes for the middle class and raise it on the wealthiest 1%, they voted against it. When we stopped sending child care checks to the wealthiest people in this country so we could put more in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, they voted against it. And now they want to justify their climate denialism from taking hundreds of dollars from families who live in our communities. It's not right, Mr. Speaker. We're going to do what it takes to help people.
Yes. Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
When you tax the farmer who grows the food and you tax the trucker who hauls the food, then you hurt the families who buy the food. Things have gotten so bad under this Liberal NDP carbon tax coalition that military families stationed in Borden and Gagetown are having to be using food banks. And troops training right here in Ottawa are relying on food donations from college staff. After 8 long years, this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower the cost on Canadian farmers and make food more affordable for all Canadians by passing Bill C-234 in its original form immediately?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, let me respond to, because I share the concern about the welfare of every member of the Canadian Armed Forces. You know, we work very hard to make sure that our forces receive all of the supports in housing and in financial supports that they require to do the important mission that they perform for all of us in this country. And Mr. Speaker, we recently negotiated, for example, a very substantial pay raise because they've earned it and they deserved it. And that's why it was such a huge disappointment when that member and all of his colleagues voted against the money for that pay raise. Mr. Speaker, we have a responsibility in this House to support the men and women who protect our country.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, imposing visas on Mexicans was necessary, but the federal government had promised that it would not affect workers. Now, Eastern Quebec is reeling from delays in the arrival of temporary foreign workers in the fishing and processing industries. Fortunately, since the Bloc Québécois leader wrote to the Minister of Immigration and the Prime Minister on March 25th, the situation has improved, and this should be acknowledged, but there are still concerns. We simply ask the Minister to reassure us. Can he confirm today that all the workers will arrive as soon as possible and that this situation will not affect other sectors like, for example, agriculture? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. It's a very relevant one. It's clear that we all want a successful fishing season in Quebec, in Canada. When those fisheries depend on Mexican visas that need to be issued, we are working 24 hours a day so that this is done quickly. We will continue working on this. We're not out of the woods, but I have hope given the hard work of the teams working on this. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Avignon, La Métis, Matane, Matapédia. There's a way to be both responsible at the border and responsible towards the entire fishing and processing economy in the Gaspé Peninsula and eastern Quebec. We simply have to work intelligently and without partisanship. The cooperation of the Minister of Immigration is to be commended, but he has the fate of an entire industry in his hands. One company has already closed because workers didn't arrive in time for the opening of the fishery, and others are afraid of suffering the same fate when their season opens for lobster. Can the Minister reassure them that workers will arrive as soon as possible? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. As I said clearly to her colleague, we are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that is the case. And imposing the visa on Mexico, which the Bloc Québécois called for, which is important, which we need to continue to underline, insofar as there are workers who have to have their passport stamped in Mexico, it has to continue. They need to do it with third parties who are helping those factories. At RARCC, we will work 24 hours a day so that it can be processed within 24 hours. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after more than 8 years of this Liberal government, we all know it's not worth the cost. The price of housing continues to soar, and the government is forgetting about municipalities to increase new housing construction. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister finally build housing and eliminate bureaucracy in his next budget? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. We won't take any lessons from the Conservatives. What we are presenting is a plan for Canadians, a plan to build more housing, a plan to create more jobs, a plan to have more prosperity in the country. Mr. Speaker, Canadians watching at home understand that slogans don't create jobs, slogans don't build houses, and slogans don't create economic prosperity, Mr. Speaker. We'll let the Conservatives keep to their slogans and videos. We will focus on Canadians. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, housing prices will continue to skyrocket, warns the CMHC. The average cost of an apartment could rise by 27% over the next 3 years in the Montreal region. A Conservative government will reward cities that increase housing construction. Why, Mr. Speaker, doesn't the Prime Minister listen to common sense and work with his provincial and municipal partners to build the housing needed for the well-being of all Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People laugh at home when they hear the Conservative members talk about cooperating with municipalities. The last time the Conservative leader spoke to the Mayor of Quebec City, the Mayor of Montreal, he insulted them. Is there anyone who thinks that cooperating is about insulting others? In 2024, it's about cooperation. That is why we put forward a plan to build more housing, help more people, create more prosperity. That's how we work in the interest of Canadians. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, I'll talk to you about another scandal. After 8 years of this Liberal government, the number of homeless people is increasing everywhere in Canada at a rapid pace. Let's take the example of Saint-Jérôme, according to a Radio Canada article. Isa, a newly homeless woman, said, "There's always my daughter who could help me, but I don't want to be a burden on her." Can this government have a little heart? My question is simple, Mr. Speaker. Will this Prime Minister finally do everything possible to build housing and stop piling on the bureaucracy in next Tuesday's budget? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Mr. Speaker, it's essential to invest to build housing. We are making investments with Quebec to build affordable housing. After an agreement with Quebec with $1.8 billion, we are building 8,000 affordable housing units just in Quebec.
Comparison across the entire country, when the Conservative leader was the housing minister, they constructed a total of 6 affordable housing units nationwide. There is no contest when it comes to supporting the most vulnerable. I question their authenticity when they actually talk about the investments, when they vote against the money behind the programs.
The Honourable Member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, residents in Davenport are concerned about the fact that the Conservative Party wishes to cut their Canada carbon rebate. For most Canadians, each penny counts. The members of my riding depend on these checks. Can the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change explain to the House how these Canada carbon rebates reduce emissions and how these checks help Canadian families? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. I thank my colleague for her question and also for her efforts in French. I'd like to highlight that starting on Monday, the Canada carbon rebate will increase on April 15th for a family in Ontario, $280 4 times a year. The PBO said 2 weeks ago that the measure that has the least impact on the economy, that allows us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, is the pollution price. Over 200 economists have confirmed this, and the Premier of Saskatchewan, with whom I just about never agree, has admitted that it's the best way to reduce climate change.
Member from Yorkton, Melville.
Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister's record-high debt and deficits, he's not worth the cost of his overpriced stocks. Inflation and interest rates continue to make lives worse. Now, an economist has said that interest rate cuts may be further delayed because of this NDP Liberal government's out-of-control spending. Conservatives have offered a common-sense solution to fix the upcoming budget. When will this Prime Minister stop his out-of-control deficits with a dollar-for-dollar rule? Find $1 in savings for every new dollar he spends.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservative, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we're presenting Canadian is a plan to build more homes, Mr. Speaker. What we're presenting Canadian is a plan to create more jobs. Mr. Speaker, what we're presenting to Canadian is a plan for prosperity. On the other side of the House, Mr. Speaker, it's slogans. Canadians at home understand that slogans don't create jobs. Slogans don't build homes. Slogans don't build prosperity, Mr. Speaker. We'll let them invent a new slogan while we focus on the matters of Canadians.
The honourable member from Renfrew Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government's addiction to spending is out of control. They're getting high off an unsafe supply of drugs and borrowed money. Their spending habit is driving up inflation. Interest rate cuts might be stalled because of out-of-control spending. Their far-left allies in BC just had their credit rating cut. This Prime Minister and his socialist coalition are not worth the cost. This government must find $1 in savings for every dollar spent. Will the Prime Minister cap spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule to bring
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite continues to ask questions but not really focus on what her party has continuously done, which is vote against measures to support Canadians time and time again. 120 votes prior to the holidays, all-night voting, voting against children, voting against supports for families, and voting against our military, Mr. Speaker. So we will take no lessons from the Conservatives in terms of supporting Canadians because our government will always be there for them.
The honourable member from Chatham-Kent, Leamington.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, this Prime Minister continues to demonstrate that he's not worth the cost. This government has added more to the national debt than all previous Prime Ministers combined. Yes, combined. And now a leading economist has stated that interest rates cuts are being delayed because of this massive government overspending. Wow. Will the Prime Minister cap government spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule, which finds $1 of savings for every dollar of new spending, so that interest rates come down and people can stay in their homes?
Great job, Dave. Great.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. Inflation is at 2.8%, down 2 months in a row below 3%. AAA credit rating, Mr. Speaker, and just in the last 9 months, a food program for students in school. We're going to make sure that there's homes built across this country. How did that member and his Ontario colleagues vote when it came for the plant in St. Thomas? How did they vote when it came to support the Ford plant? They voted against. We're here for Canadians. That's what they expect. We're going to do that each and every day.
The honourable member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, we know that folks need to be connected, especially in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities in Alberta. It allows access to education, jobs, healthcare services, and innovation that otherwise would be unreachable. Unfortunately, for 10 years, the Conservatives failed to prioritize investments in connectivity. Because of their lack of action, communities in my province have been left out of those opportunities. The good news is that our government is tackling this issue head on. Can the government tell us what progress has been made towards connecting Albertans to affordable quality?
The Honourable Minister.
Since 2015, we have been making investments in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, so Albertans can access the tools of the 21st century. Today, just under 90% of Albertans have access to high-speed internet. In March, I was there to announce 14 projects to connect over 22,000 homes, 3,400 Indigenous homes, all in rural Alberta. This $112 million investment is in partnership with the province as part of our commitment to connect all Canadians by 2030. We will always stick up for Albertans, Mr. Speaker, and my colleague from Calgary Skyward always sticks up for Albertans and his constituents too. Thank you.
The honourable member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are experiencing the brunt of the climate crisis, with damage caused by flooding and the fear of wildfire evacuations. All while the Liberals are rewarding the very people who are getting rich off it. Liberals gave over $18 billion to rich oil and gas companies last year. And today, we found out they broke $15 billion in climate promises. They announced $15 billion just for the photo ops. Why is it that the Liberals have no problem rewarding Canada's biggest polluters, but they won't invest in our children's?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. As she knows, I was an environmental activist for many years, and in my years, we could only dream of a federal government that would invest tens of billions of dollars in the transition to fight climate change, to create the jobs and the economy of the 21st century, Mr. Speaker. We have committed more than $100 billion since 2015 in the fight against climate change. That's not double what had been done before. That's not 4 times more that had been done before. That's not 10 times more. It's 20 times more.
Wow.
That has never been done before in Canada in terms of investment to fight climate change and create the opportunities of the 21st century.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
The Honourable Member from Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, many Canadians were let down when the Liberals suddenly ended the Greener Homes program. And yesterday we learned that over $1 billion promised to that program went unspent. Wow. Meanwhile, across Canada, hundreds of people built their careers and their businesses on providing service as part of Greener Homes. They were urged to do that by this government. Now they feel like the rug's been pulled out from under them. Some of them are selling their equipment. Why has this minister left these important clean energy workers in limbo?
Here, here, here. The Honourable Minister for Energy and Natural Resources and Energy.
For the question and for the discussion that he and I had at the airport on this particular subject, and I think we are intending to meet more about it going forward. The Greener Homes program was indeed very successful. We actually utilized all of the funding early, and thus we have closed the portal. But we have also announced we will be moving forward with a new program that will be focused on folks who live on modest incomes, enabling them to make deep retrofits moving forward, to reduce carbon emissions, and to enhance their energy savings on an ongoing basis. And we are very much committed to putting that in force.
We have reached the end of question period. I would like to take a moment to make a statement concerning the question of privilege raised by the member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola. Yesterday, on Monday, April 8, 2024, the member raised concerns on the government responses to order paper questions. As indicated by the member in his comments, I signed these responses when I was the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister. So that no conflict of interest may be perceived, I will recuse myself from this matter, and I will not comment further on this. I have asked that the Deputy Speaker rule on the question of privilege. He will therefore return with a ruling in a timely manner.
We arrive at the resuming debate on orders of the day.
Orders of the day, ordre du jour, reprise du débat sur une motion.
Resuming debate on supply motion on a carbon tax emergency meeting, standing in the name of Mr. Poilievre.
J'ai